by Rob Keyes. And we're going to be looking at the influence of habitat on breeding grassland birds. So we're looking at grassland birds because over the past 30 years, there's been a dramatic habitat decline in the Midwest. So you can see in this graph here, it shows the percentage change over several years, and the grasslands is that dark blue line at the bottom, and it's one of the most significant declines out of all those habitats shown there. And just recently, there started to be an increase in the habitat again, just as more conservation efforts have been put into place because of this dramatic decline. So that's encouraging, but there's been a lot of decrease over the past 30 years, and a lot of this comes from other uses that the grasslands have been used for, such as agriculture, putting farming practices in, and just urbanization in general. And this has actually converted 80% of our grasslands to these other uses. So two of our species that we're looking at are the Henslow sparrow and the grasshopper sparrow. And the Henslow's is an IUCN red list species, and it's a near threatened species. And the grasshopper sparrow has a population that has just been declining in general. So these are our two main species that we're looking at because of this.
So generally how we are going to, I guess, relate this sort of research to PCCI is that recently the hedgerows and the prairies have been removed, making the areas more contiguous, possibly making it more hospitable for these birds. But we have not seen the population increase that we have wanted to see. It has been, I guess, expected, but it hasn't been seen. So these Henslow sparrows and grasshopper sparrows have not been flourishing, so we're trying to figure out potentially what management practices could be used in the future and what we can do with PCCI in order to make those populations increase.
So a specific question that we're going to be looking at are what habitat characteristics, landscape features, or management practices at each of our study locations act as attractors or detriments to these grassland birds, specifically looking at the grasshopper sparrow and the Henslow sparrow.
In regards to how we are going about this study, is that we are going to have specifically 5 areas in which we are going to have 9 sites. As seen in the picture at the left, PCCI has 3 prairies that we're looking at in particular. And what is really interesting about all of these areas that we're looking at, there are both private and public lands that we're doing our surveys in, which I guess implies that there are different management practices taken into account. Like there has been prescribed burns, like seen at PCCI, and we have also seen mowing occurring in some of these properties, and we're also seeing that these plots are just left alone, seeing potentially how they can manage on their own. And what we're also doing with the areas that we're studying is that we are breaking them into sections so that we can further do our bird surveys with some stratified randomization as we do our point counts.
So part of our project is looking at bird abundance and biodiversity. And one way we're doing this is through bird surveys. And these involve a 10-minute point count where we go out into the field, and as Darien said, that we have our sections split up, and we use a GPS and find different points on different days of the week and our different fields. And so once we get to our point, then we have a 5-minute acclimation period. And we use this to just allow the birds to get used to our presence and start hearing their songs again once they get comfortable with us being in the area. And after that 5-minute acclimation period, we start our 10-minute point count. And during this time, we have a 50-meter radius that we're just listen to the birds around us, and we record on data sheets the different songs that we hear the birds sing. So at each site, we have about 5 to 7 sections, so that's about how many point counts we'll do in a day. And also playing a factor into this are the territory sizes of the birds. So some of the birds have small territory sizes, such as the Henslow sparrow. So it wouldn't be uncommon to hear 4 or 5 of them in one point count site, and they would all be distinct birds. But a bird with a larger territory size, such as a meadowlark, you would usually only hear 1 or maybe 2 of them because they have larger territory size and will actually fly around within our point count site. And on the screen here, the bird on your far left there, the head bright yellow on him, that's one of our eastern meadowlarks that we saw in one of the fields. And then the very far right is a bobolink, which we also saw. Both of these were seen at the Gerald Ford Airport. Another aspect of bird abundance and biodiversity are nest surveys that we've been conducting. And we've been doing this through rope dragging. And in rope dragging, we take a 30-meter rope and just pull it across the field. And we're looking for flushed birds. And when the rope goes over to the grass, they flush out the birds because they're ground nesting birds. So the rope just scares them out. And once we see where they fly out, then we go and search for their nest there. And we've had a spotter with us before, as you can see in the picture. And that's really helpful in spotting actually where the bird has flown out of the grass. And we actually have not found any of our grassland bird species, but we did find a red-winged blackbird nest. We've been finding lots of red-winged blackbirds.
And in regards to the abiotic factors of the areas that we're studying, we are looking at just the vegetation overall. And one of the things that we're looking at is litter depth, and just looking at how much of the litter is on the ground, just accumulating over the years. And that's important for the birds that we're looking at in particular because they're ground nesting birds, so they need that vegetative density in order to establish their nests so they can raise their young successfully. And then the vegetative density is important because it allows for cover for these birds, so it is more hospitable for them to live so they don't feel threatened at all and they can hide from predators.
So some preliminary results that we have so far for the bird surveys involve edge effects. And a lot of our fields that have more edge around them, we've noticed that there's not quite the biodiversity that the fields have compared to the ones that don't have edges. So the ones with edges, we just have not found a lot of our grassland species. But then a few of our fields which have hardly any edge, we found the most biodiversity. And also, going along with that, the territory sizes again just play a role into how many birds we're finding in our different point count sites. And some of our point count sites, we also may be finding the same bird if it has a larger territory size. So one week we might have a point count site that we find a meadowlark in, and the next week we might be in a point adjacent to that site and find the meadowlark again in that site too, just because it has a larger territory size. And one of our surprising results, which has been really encouraging, is there's a great abundance of Henslow sparrows that we found around the area. In previous years, we have not found many of these at all. In previous studies done. But this year we've been finding them quite a bit, and we haven't found any on Pierce's property, but right down the road at Soya Farm and on the corner of Cloverdale and Broadway, there's been several that we found in the fields down there. And then also the nest surveys, some of the results from those is, like I said earlier, we've only found the red-winged blackbird nests. We haven't actually found any grassland species nests, which was unexpected. But one way we did alter our results with the rope dragging is our rope. We found out originally was too light, and it just felt like it was like the wind was just kind of going over the grass. It wasn't heavy enough to actually scare out these birds since they're ground nesting. And so we altered our rope and put cans on it and put bells in the cans and made it louder and heavier, and that was a little more effective. We did find some flush birds, but we just never found their nests. And we're also continuing to find different vegetative compositions in each of our fields. Pierce's property is very different than Soya's farm, and we want to figure out more on whether that's causing the bird biodiversity to be so much higher in Soya's field compared to Pierce's. But we haven't done all of our vegetative studies yet, so most of that is observation just from us being in the field.
I think this is the most exciting slide. So looking further in Henslow sparrow abundance, the picture on the left that you see is the Soya farm that Whitney mentioned before, and all of the little H's that you see on this GIS snapshot are Henslow sparrows that we heard in the field that we put on GIS later in the day. And on the right side is the Gerald R. Ford International Airport site that we are also studying and doing surveys on. And what we found very interesting was that the southern half of the area that we're studying has plenty more Henslow sparrows than the northern half, which I guess we could take into consideration of the edge effects and how the northern portion of the area is more narrow. So potentially the Henslow sparrows are not very attracted to that type of area because they seem threatened, or just that area is not hospitable to a larger amount of birds. And overall, the birds that we have found from left to right, we have the Henslow sparrow, the grasshopper sparrow, savanna sparrow, bobolink, eastern meadowlark, field sparrow, common yellowthroat, and song sparrow. And with each of these areas, we were very surprised to see that most of the birds we found were at Soya Farm and the airport. And with Pure Cedar Creek, we found it very surprising that we could only find 3 specific species of birds. And in general, this is what this study is trying to determine, why we're only seeing these number of birds rather than the other few that we're seeing at these other 2 fields.
So future plans are to continue our vegetative studies. And this will just help us find out more about whether there's a correlation between the birds that we find at Pierce and the vegetation also here at Pure Cedar Creek, and whether there's just a correlation between the grassland birds and the vegetation that they nest in. We'll also be completing our point counts at the end of June here, and after that we're going to be taking that data and compiling it and doing more analysis on it. We will also be doing a landscape analysis, which is just all on GIS. We'll be taking looking at the center of the field and going 1 kilometer out as a radius around that area, and just looking at the dominant landscape around there, whether it be grassland, woods, urbanization, any kind of landscape. We're just going to see if that has an effect on the breeding population of the birds as well. And then we'll be taking our data and just doing model building and statistical analysis on that. And hopefully that will help us just present some better management plans for Pierce on how they can attract more grassland